single whispered word in a crowded ballroom just destroyed 40 of the world's most brilliant minds. And she's just a waitress nobody even looks at. Tonight, you're going to witness how the quietest person in the room becomes the only one who can save a billionaire's crumbling empire, expose a decades-old conspiracy, and uncover a family secret buried beneath an entire desert. This is a story about invisible people, stolen languages, and the dangerous truth that the powerful will kill to protect. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor, and nobody even turned to look. Lily Bennett was already on her knees, her hands shaking as she picked up the broken pieces, trying to make herself even smaller than she already felt. Around her, the Grand Lexington Hotel ballroom hummed with the kind of wealth that didn't notice when things broke, or when people did. Careful with those hands, sweetheart, one of the servers muttered as he passed. You cut yourself, you're off the floor. Management doesn't want blood on the Persian rugs. Lily nodded, keeping her eyes down. She'd been working at the Grand Lexington for 3 months now, and she'd learned the most important rule fast. Don't exist. Be a shadow. Carry the tray, pour the wine, clear the plates, and for the love of everything, don't make eye contact with the guests. Especially not tonight. Tonight was different. Tonight, the ballroom was packed with the kind of people who got written about in newspapers with words like distinguished and renowned and world-leading expert. 40 of them, to be exact. 40 professors, linguists, anthropologists, and historians all gathered here for some kind of competition that nobody on staff fully understood. All Lily knew was that the prize was $10 million, and the man offering it was sitting alone at a corner table, barely touching his scotch. Ethan Calloway. Even from across the room, he looked exactly like his pictures. Sharp jawline, dark hair that probably cost more to maintain than her monthly rent, and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they landed on. He wore a black suit that fit him like it had been invented specifically for his body, and he had the kind of posture that came from never having to ask for anything twice. 32 years old. Billionaire, single father, CEO of the Calloway Historical Foundation, which apparently did something important with old documents and cultural preservation and a bunch of other things that people like Lily were never supposed to understand. She'd Googled him after getting assigned to work this event, not because she cared about rich people. She'd stopped caring about rich people around the same time she'd started cleaning up after them, but because the other servers had been whispering about him all week. I heard his wife died in childbirth, Sandra had said, while they were folding napkins in the prep room. No, it was a car accident, Miguel had corrected. And they weren't married. She left him with the kid and ran off. You're both wrong, Marcus had chimed in. There was no wife. He used a surrogate because he didn't want to deal with an actual relationship. Lily hadn't contributed to the speculation. She had enough problems without wondering about the personal life of a man who probably spent more on watches than she made in a year. She dumped the broken glass into a bin behind the service curtain and grabbed a fresh tray of canapes. The kitchen had been cranking out food for 3 hours now, tiny portions of expensive ingredients that the guests mostly ignored. Lily had learned not to be bitter about the waste. Being bitter took energy, and she needed to save that for getting through her shift, taking the tea home, checking on her mother, and collapsing into bed before doing it all again tomorrow. Table 7 needs refills, the floor manager snapped as Lily emerged with her tray. And for Christ's sake, smile. You look like you're at a funeral. Lily forced her mouth into something that might pass for pleasant and headed toward table 7, where 3 elderly academics were engaged in what sounded like a very intense argument about verb conjugation. The morphological structure clearly indicates a Proto-Semitic root. Nonsense. The syntax alone proves it evolved independently. Gentlemen, you're both overlooking the obvious cultural context. Lily set down the fresh glasses and removed the empty ones without interrupting. That was another skill she'd developed. Invisibility through efficiency. Move quick, stay quiet, and never, ever get involved in the conversations. She was halfway back to the kitchen when the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the ballroom as a spotlight illuminated a small stage at the far end of the room. A woman in a severe gray suit stepped up to the microphone. Victoria Chen, Ethan Calloway's executive assistant, according to the briefing sheet the staff had received. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, her voice crisp and amplified. "Thank you for joining us this evening." As you know, you represent the finest linguistic minds currently working in the field of ancient Near Eastern languages. You've been selected from over 300 applicants worldwide, and each of you has signed the necessary non-disclosure agreements regarding tonight's challenge. Lily positioned herself against the wall, tray balanced on one hip. The other servers had done the same, forming a ring of invisible labor around the room's perimeter. Mr. Calloway will now present the text in question, Victoria continued, stepping aside. Ethan rose from his corner table and walked to the stage. Even his walk was expensive, confident, unhurried, like he knew the world would wait for him to arrive. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than Lily expected. Not soft exactly, but controlled. Like every word cost something, and he didn't waste them. 3 months ago, Ethan began, while cataloging materials from my grandfather's estate, my team discovered a letter. The letter is approximately 80 years old, written in a dialect that our initial consultants identified as a variant of ancient Akkadian mixed with elements of Proto-Arabic and possible Persian influences. We've had it examined by 12 separate experts. None of them could provide a complete translation. He paused, and Lily found herself leaning forward slightly, caught despite herself. The letter contained 7 sentences. 6 of them have been successfully translated. The 7th has not. Tonight, you will each have 30 minutes to examine the original document and provide your translation of that final sentence. The first person to provide an accurate and complete translation will receive $10 million. The ballroom erupted into murmurs. Even the scholars who probably had healthy salaries and book deals and tenure couldn't hide their interest in that kind of money. Victoria stepped forward with a metal case, which she placed on a table beside Ethan. He opened it carefully, removing what looked like a piece of aged parchment enclosed in a protective sleeve. "You'll work in order," Ethan said. "Professor Whitmore, you're first." A man stood up from the front table, tall, silver-haired, wearing a tweed jacket that probably cost more than Lily's entire wardrobe. He had the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now aging into something distinguished and self-satisfied. Damien Whitmore. Lily felt her stomach twist. She knew that name. Knew that face. Her father had known it too, back before everything fell apart. Lily pressed herself harder against the wall, grateful for the shadows, grateful for the way rich people never really looked at the help. She watched as Damien approached the document with theatrical reverence, pulling out a magnifying glass and a leather notebook. "Fascinating," he murmured loud enough for everyone to hear. "Truly fascinating. The grammatical structure here is quite complex, but I believe I see the pattern." He scribbled notes, held the document up to the light, scribbled more notes. When his 30 minutes were up, he straightened with obvious confidence. "The sentence reads," Damien announced, "The gold of our fathers sleeps beneath the 3rd stone from the eastern gate." He said it with such certainty that several people in the audience nodded approvingly. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Incorrect." Damien's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon?" "Incorrect," Ethan repeated, still in that same controlled voice. "Thank you, Professor. Dr. Reeves, you're next." Lily watched as one scholar after another took their turn. A woman from Oxford who specialized in Mesopotamian trade languages. A team from Berlin who'd written the definitive text on cuneiform evolution. A young hotshot from Stanford who'd made his name decoding previously untranslatable tablets. All of them failed. Some of them got angry. Some got defensive. One woman accused Ethan of presenting a forgery, which earned her a cold stare and an escort to the door. By the time they'd gone through 35 scholars, the ballroom had taken on a different energy. The initial excitement had curdled into frustration, then embarrassment, then something harder to name. These were people who'd built entire careers on being the smartest people in their rooms, and now they were being systematically proven wrong in front of their peers. Lily had refilled glasses, cleared plates, and remained invisible through it all. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt. She wanted to go home, but her shift didn't end for another 3 hours. She was standing near the eastern wall, trying to redistribute the weight on her aching feet, when the 36th scholar, a nervous-looking man from Tokyo, finished his attempt. "The riches of antiquity await those who follow the old paths," he said, sounding uncertain. "Incorrect." The man bowed slightly and returned to his seat, looking defeated. Lily couldn't help it. She'd been watching these translations for over 2 hours now, and they were all making the same mistake. She could see it, see where they were going wrong, and the words just slipped out before she could stop them. "Wrong," she whispered. It wasn't loud. She barely breathed it. But the ballroom had gone quiet between translations, and somehow, impossibly, people heard. Heads turned. Damian Whitmore, who'd been sulking at his table since his own failure, stood up abruptly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Did the waitress just say something?" Lily felt her face go hot. Every eye in the room was on her now. All 40 scholars, all the other staff members, Victoria Chen, and Ethan Calloway, whose dark eyes had locked onto her with an intensity that made her want to disappear through the floor. I didn't mean... I'm sorry," Lily stammered, looking down at her tray. "I shouldn't have..." "No, please," Damien interrupted, walking toward her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Share with us, since you apparently know something that 40 PhDs don't. What's wrong with our translations?" "I really didn't..." "Go on," Damien pressed, and now his voice had an edge to it. "Enlighten us. Tell us what we're missing. You must have quite the educational background to correct the leading experts in ancient linguistics." A few people laughed. Not kindly. Lily wanted to run, wanted to drop her tray and just run out of the ballroom and never come back. She'd lost jobs for less. Hell, she'd lost her father for less. Or the version of her father who'd once been somebody, anyway. But then she made the mistake of looking up, and her eyes met Ethan's. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And then he did something unexpected. He spoke. "Let her examine the document." The ballroom went dead silent. Damien turned to face Ethan. "You can't be serious." "Why not?" Ethan's voice remained level. 40 experts have failed. I said the first person to provide an accurate translation would win the prize. I didn't specify credentials. "This is absurd," Damien sputtered. "This is a scholarly competition, not a circus." "Then you should have gotten it right the first time," Ethan said, and there was something cold in his tone now. Something that shut Damien up immediately. He turned to Lily. "What's your name?" "Lily. Lily Bennett." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "Lily Bennett, would you like to examine the document?" She should say no. She should apologize again, claim she'd just been tired and said something stupid, and fade back into the wallpaper where she belonged. But that wasn't what came out of her mouth. "Yes." Ethan nodded once. "Victoria, bring Miss Bennett a chair." The next few minutes felt like they were happening to someone else. Victoria Chen, looking annoyed but professional, set up a chair at the document table. Lily put down her serving tray with shaking hands and walked across the ballroom floor, aware of every eye following her, every whispered comment. "This is a joke, right? Who does he think he is, letting the staff..." "I'm calling the competition board." "Quiet," Ethan said, and everyone went quiet. Lily sat down. The document was in front of her now, behind its protective sleeve. The parchment was brown with age, covered in flowing script that was barely visible in places. She could smell the faint scent of preservation chemicals. Her hands were still shaking as she leaned forward to study it. The first 6 sentences were exactly what the briefing materials had said. A mixture of ancient Akkadian and Proto-Arabic with some unusual grammatical structures that suggested the writer was either multilingual or working in a trade pidgin. They told a story about a journey, a betrayal, and a warning. But the 7th sentence, Lily felt her breath catch. The 7th sentence wasn't in Akkadian, it wasn't in Arabic. It was in a dialect her father had taught her when she was 12 years old, back when he was still Professor Marcus Bennett of Boston University. Back before Damian Whitmore had destroyed his career. The dialect didn't have an official name. Her father had called it the shepherd's language, a nearly extinct linguistic variant once spoken by nomadic tribes in a specific region of the Syrian desert. Only a handful of scholars had ever studied it, and even fewer could read it fluently. Her father had been one of them. Until Damian stole his research, published it under his own name, and got Marcus Bennett fired for plagiarism when he tried to fight back. Lily hadn't thought about that language in years. After her father's career imploded, after he'd started drinking, after her mother got sick and they lost the house, and Lily had to drop out of college to work 3 jobs. She'd buried all of it. The languages, the linguistics, the dreams of following in her father's footsteps. But apparently, some things you didn't forget. She stared at the sentence, and the words came back to her like muscle memory. "Well?" Damien's voice cut through her concentration. Are we waiting for divine inspiration or beware the wolf beside the well, Lily said quietly, for he wears the shepherd's clothes. The ballroom went absolutely silent. Lily looked up from the document, her heart pounding. That's what it says. It's not about gold or riches or anything like that. It's a warning about betrayal, about someone who's pretending to be something they're not. Ethan had gone very still. Say that again. Beware the wolf beside the well, for he wears the shepherd's clothes. Lily's voice was stronger now. The grammar structure is tricky. The word for wolf can also mean hidden enemy, and beside the well is an idiom that means close to home or within the family. And shepherd doesn't just mean someone who tends sheep. In this dialect, it specifically refers to a protector or guardian. So a more complete translation would be, beware the enemy within your own family who pretends to protect you. The silence stretched out for what felt like forever. Then Ethan stood up. He walked to the table where Lily sat, moving with that same careful control, and looked down at the document, then at her. How do you know that? His voice was quiet, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. My father taught me, Lily said. Before... She stopped, glancing at Damien, who'd gone pale. Before his career ended. Your father's name? Marcus Bennett. She watched Ethan's eyes flicker with recognition. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Anyone who'd studied Middle Eastern historical linguistics in the past 15 years would know about the scandal, about the plagiarism accusations, about the brilliant scholar who'd fallen from grace. The wolf, Ethan said slowly. You're certain about that translation? Yes? And you're certain the idiom means within the family? Yes. Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he turned to face the room. Ms. Bennett's translation is correct. The ballroom erupted. Scholars jumped to their feet, shouting protests. Damien's face had gone from pale to red, and he was yelling something about verification and proper procedure. Victoria was trying to restore order. Other staff members were staring at Lily like she'd just grown a second head. Through it all, Ethan remained calm. The challenge stated that the first person to provide an accurate translation would receive the prize, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Ms. Bennett has done so. The competition is over. This is unacceptable. Damien pushed his way to the front. You can't possibly verify her translation without... I can verify it, Ethan interrupted, because I know what the sentence says. My grandfather wrote this letter 80 years ago as a coded warning to my father. The wolf was a family nickname, one that's been kept private for decades. His eyes fixed on Damien with something cold and dangerous. So unless you'd like to explain how you knew enough to steal Marcus Bennett's research 15 years ago, but not enough to translate a simple warning, I suggest you sit down. Damien's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Furthermore, Ethan continued, and now there was steel in his voice, Ms. Bennett's translation revealed something the rest of you missed. She didn't just translate the words, she understood the context, the cultural idioms, the layers of meaning. He turned back to Lily, who was still sitting at the table, feeling like she'd been caught in a tornado. You said the word for wolf can also mean hidden enemy, Ethan said. What else can you tell me about this dialect? Lily swallowed hard. It's almost extinct. My father spent 20 years documenting it before... She stopped again, but this time Ethan's expression told her to continue. The tribes who spoke it were displaced in the 1970s during various conflicts. Most of the native speakers died without passing it on. My father managed to interview some of the last remaining speakers and create a comprehensive grammar and vocabulary database. The database that was published under Professor Whitmore's name, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Damien started to object, but Ethan held up a hand. I've read your published work, Professor Whitmore. All of it, including your seminal 2009 paper on extinct Syrian dialects. He paused. I've also read Marcus Bennett's original grant proposal from 2006, which was rejected by the University Review Board after you sat on the committee. The proposals are nearly identical. Same methodology, same research questions, same field sites. That's a serious accusation, Damien began. It's a statement of fact, Ethan said, which I can prove, if necessary, through a very public lawsuit. or you can leave quietly and consider this a professional courtesy. Damien looked around the room, but he didn't find support. Some of the other scholars were looking at him with new suspicion. Others were carefully studying their wine glasses. He grabbed his jacket and left without another word. After he was gone, the ballroom slowly settled back into uneasy quiet. Ethan turned to Victoria. Have the legal team draft the prize paperwork. $10 million to Ms. Lily Bennett. Payable immediately. Lily felt the world tilt. I can't. That's not... I was just... You solved a problem that 40 PhDs couldn't, Ethan said. The money is yours, but I need to ask you something else. He gestured for Victoria to bring over a laptop, which she did with obvious reluctance. Ethan typed something, then turned the screen toward Lily. It was a map, a detailed topographical map of a desert region, covered in notations and markers. Your translation mentioned that beside the well can mean within the family, Ethan said. But in the literal sense, does it actually reference a specific location? A physical well? Lily studied the screen. It could. The phrase is contextual. If you're speaking metaphorically, it means close to home. But if you're giving directions, she leaned closer, looking at the ancient text again. There are geographical markers in the grammar structure, directional particles that wouldn't be there if it was purely metaphorical. Show me. For the next 20 minutes, Lily walked Ethan through the linguistic nuances she'd learned from her father. How the dialect encoded spatial information into verb tenses, how certain word combinations indicated landmarks, how the shepherd's language had evolved specifically for nomadic navigation. By the time she was done, they'd identified 3 possible coordinates based on historical well locations in the Syrian-Iraqi border region. Ethan was staring at the map like it had just rearranged his entire understanding of the universe. There's something else, Lily said hesitantly. The way the sentence is structured, the grammatical mood. It's not just a warning, it's also a pointer, like breadcrumbs. Whoever wrote this wanted someone to find something specific. Find what? I don't know, but the verb tense suggests something hidden, something buried or concealed. She paused. And the time markers in the surrounding sentences, they don't match. Ethan looked up sharply. What do you mean? The first 6 sentences reference events from 80 years ago, right? Based on your grandfather's life? Correct. But the 7th sentence uses a future conditional tense that only exists in this dialect when you're talking about events that haven't happened yet. Or, she trailed off, frowning. Or events that are still ongoing. That's impossible, Ethan said, but his voice was tight. My grandfather died 78 years ago. I'm just telling you what the grammar says. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Ethan closed the laptop and stood up. Victoria, clear my schedule for the next week. I need to make some calls. Sir, now, please. Victoria nodded and retreated, pulling out her phone. Ethan turned back to Lily. The 10 million is yours regardless. But I have a proposition. I need someone who can read this dialect fluently, who understands the cultural context, and who can help me verify something. If you're willing, I'll pay you an additional consulting fee, let's say $50,000 a week, to work with my research team. Lily's head was spinning. I'm a waitress. I don't have any credentials. I didn't even finish my undergrad. You just did in 20 minutes what 40 credentialed experts couldn't do in 2 hours. Ethan interrupted. I don't care about degrees. I care about results. What exactly are you trying to verify? Ethan hesitated, which seemed unlike him. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. My grandfather, James Calloway, was an archaeologist and historical preservationist. He died in 1948 during an expedition to document ancient trade routes in what's now Syria. His body was never recovered. The official story is that he was caught in a sandstorm and died of exposure. But you don't believe that? I did. Until 3 months ago, when we found this letter in a safe deposit box that nobody knew existed. The letter was supposedly written by my grandfather before he died. But if you're right about the verb tenses, if this sentence is talking about ongoing events, then either my grandfather didn't die when we think he did, or someone else wrote the letter, Lily finished. Exactly. And the warning about the wolf, the enemy in the family, that could mean that whoever's been handling the Calloway estate for the past 78 years has been lying about something very important. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. That's a lot of money and power at stake. Yes, Ethan said, which is why I'm asking someone I just met instead of using my existing staff. I don't know who I can trust. You don't know if you can trust me either. No, Ethan agreed. But you're the first person who's told me the truth about something tonight, and you did it even when it meant risking your job and humiliating yourself in front of people who've spent their lives making people like you feel small. That counts for something. Lily thought about her mother, lying in a hospital bed with medical bills piling up faster than Lily could pay them. She thought about her father, broken and bitter in his studio apartment, drinking away the career he'd lost. She thought about herself, carrying trays and being invisible, and going home every night too tired to even cry. Okay, she said. I'll help you. Good. Ethan pulled out a business card and a pen, scribbling something on the back. This is my private number. Call me tomorrow and we'll set up a proper contract. In the meantime, he gestured to Victoria, who materialized beside him. Victoria will arrange for your prize payment and handle your resignation from the hotel, assuming you want to resign. Yes, I do. Then we'll talk tomorrow. He turned to leave, then paused and looked back at her. Ms. Bennett, thank you for speaking up. I know it wasn't easy. Then he was gone, sweeping out of the ballroom with Victoria in his wake, leaving Lily standing alone beside a 78-year-old letter that might be about to turn both of their worlds upside down. Around her, the other scholars were packing up, most of them avoiding eye contact. A few looked angry, one or two looked impressed. Most just looked defeated. Lily picked up her serving tray with numb hands and walked back toward the kitchen, her mind racing. $10 million, a consulting job that paid more in a week than she made in a year, and a mystery that involved hidden enemies, lost grandfathers, and secrets that someone had buried for almost 8 decades. The shift manager stopped her at the kitchen door. What the hell just happened out there? He demanded. Lily looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since she'd started working here. I quit, she said, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she walked out into the Boston night feeling like maybe, just maybe, she was something more than invisible. Kak. Behind her in the empty ballroom, the ancient letter sat on its table, the 7th sentence still visible through the protective sleeve. Beware the wolf beside the well, for he wears the shepherd's clothes. But there was something else there too, something Lily hadn't mentioned yet because she wasn't quite sure what it meant. Hidden in the curved tail of the last letter, disguised as a decorative flourish, was a tiny symbol, a camel, sleeping. Lily's mother was asleep when she got home, which was both a relief and a disappointment. The apartment, a 3rd-floor walk-up in Dorchester that smelled like old carpet and someone else's cooking, was dark except for the glow of the muted television. Her mother's breathing machine hummed steadily from the bedroom. Lily dropped her purse on the kitchen counter and just stood there for a minute, trying to make sense of the past 4 hours. $10 million. The number didn't feel real. It felt like something from a movie, or a mistake, or a fever dream she'd wake up from to find herself still carrying trays and dodging handsy drunks at the Grand Lexington. She pulled out the business card Ethan had given her. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Simple. Ethan Calloway, and a phone number, nothing else. On the back, he'd written another number in black ink. His private line, he'd said. Lily turned the card over in her fingers, then set it carefully on the counter beside her phone. She should feel excited, grateful, relieved that she could finally pay her mother's medical bills, fix the car that had been making that grinding noise for 6 months, maybe even help her father. Her father. Lily pulled out her phone and stared at his contact information. They hadn't spoken in 3 weeks. The last time she'd called, he'd been drunk at 2 p.m, rambling about academic integrity and stolen legacies, and how the whole system was rigged against people who actually cared about the truth. She'd listened for 10 minutes, then made an excuse about getting to work. Now she had news that might actually matter to him. Proof that Damian Whitmore was a fraud. Vindication, maybe, after 15 years. But it was 1 a.m, and calling him now would just mean dealing with whatever state he was in, and she was too tired for that. Tomorrow. She'd call tomorrow. Lily checked on her mother, still sleeping, oxygen levels stable according to the monitor, then collapsed into bed without bothering to change out of her work clothes. She dreamed about letters written in languages nobody spoke anymore, and wolves that wore human faces. The next morning, Lily woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Her heart jumped into her throat before she'd even fully opened her eyes. That many messages meant something was wrong. Her mother. Had to be her mother. The monitors, the machines, something had failed during the night. But when she grabbed her phone with shaking hands, none of the calls were from her mother's doctors. They were from numbers she didn't recognize. And the texts. Is this the waitress from last night? Channel 7 wants an interview about the translation challenge. Globe reporter here, looking to verify some details about the Callaway competition. This is Ashley Chen from BuzzFeed News. We'd love to talk about your win. Lily stared at the screen, her stomach sinking. Someone had leaked it. Of course someone had leaked it. 40 scholars and a ballroom full of hotel staff, and she'd been naive enough to think this would stay quiet. She scrolled through the messages with growing dread until she found one from a number she actually recognized. Miguel, one of the other servers from the hotel. Girl, you're everywhere. Check Twitter. Lily didn't have Twitter, had never wanted Twitter. But she opened her browser and searched her own name with hands that had started shaking again. The results made her want to throw up. Mystery waitress wins $10 million translation challenge. Boston server defeats 40 PhDs in linguistic competition. Who is Lily Bennett? The viral waitress who solved an impossible puzzle. There were photos. Someone had taken photos of her at the document table, looking terrified and small. There were videos from phones that had apparently been recording despite the NDA everyone had signed. There were think pieces about class and education and the myth of expertise. And there, trending on what she assumed was Twitter, was a hashtag #WaitressGenius. No, Lily said out loud. No, 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 no! Her phone rang. Unknown number. She declined it. It rang again immediately. Different unknown number. She turned it off completely and sat on her bed trying to breathe, trying to think. This was bad. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd spent her entire adult life trying to avoid. Being invisible was safe. Being talked about, being photographed, being turned into a news story. That was how you got hurt. Her mother's voice came from the bedroom, weak but awake. Lily, is everything okay? Lily took a breath and forced her voice steady. Everything's fine, Mom. Go back to sleep. But everything wasn't fine, and it was about to get worse. By noon, there were reporters outside the apartment building. Lily watched them from the window, feeling trapped. She'd turned her phone back on long enough to call Ethan's private number, but it had gone straight to voicemail. She'd left a message, tried to sound calm, professional, not like she was having a quiet panic attack, asking him to call her back. That had been 2 hours ago. Her mother was up now, sitting in her chair by the window with her oxygen tube and a cup of tea, watching the reporters with a mixture of confusion and concern. They're saying you won $10 million, her mother said. Is that true? It's complicated. Lily? Yes, I did. But Mom, I don't want to talk about it right now, okay? I need to figure out. Someone knocked on the door. Not a polite knock, a cop knock. Lily's heart rate spiked again. She looked through the peephole and saw 2 people in suits, not cops. Worse. Ms. Bennett, the woman called through the door. I'm Agent Sarah Kim with the FBI. We need to ask you some questions about last night's event. Lily's mother made a small sound of alarm. It's okay, Lily said, though she had no idea if that was true. She opened the door but kept the chain on. Can I see identification? Agent Kim held up a badge. Her partner, a tired-looking man in his 50s, did the same. We're not here to arrest you, Kim said, reading Lily's expression correctly. But we do need to talk. May we come in? Lily glanced back at her mother, who looked small and scared in her chair. Can we do this somewhere else? My mother's not well and I don't want to. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here, the male agent said. His voice was gentler than his face. We can talk there. Give me 5 minutes. Lily closed the door and leaned against it, trying to steady herself. FBI. Why would the FBI care about a translation challenge? Unless it wasn't really about the challenge at all. Lily? Her mother's voice was small. What's happening? I don't know yet, Mom, but I'll fix it, okay? I promise. It was a stupid promise. She had no idea how to fix any of this. But it made her mother relax a little, and right now that was all Lily could manage. The coffee shop was called Brew Haven and was the kind of aggressively hipster place that served $8 lattes and had motivational quotes on the walls. Agent Kim ordered black coffee. Her partner, who'd introduced himself as Agent Morrison, ordered nothing. Lily sat across from them in a back booth, her own untouched coffee going cold between her hands. "You're not in trouble," Kim said again, which was what people said right before they explained exactly what trouble you were in. "But we need to understand what happened last night. Specifically, we need to know about the document you translated." "I signed an NDA," Lily said carefully. "The NDA is between you and the Callaway Foundation," Morrison said. "It doesn't apply to federal investigations." "Investigation into what?" Kim and Morrison exchanged a look. Kim pulled out a tablet and set it on the table between them. "How much do you know about the Callaway family?" Kim asked. "Just what's public. Ethan Callaway runs a historical foundation. His grandfather was an archaeologist who died in the 1940s. "And do you know what his grandfather was doing in Syria when he died?" "Documenting trade routes, I think. That's what Ethan said." Kim tapped the tablet, pulling up a document that looked like it had been scanned from microfilm. "James Callaway was officially working as an archaeologist, yes, but he was also working for the U.S. State Department on a classified project related to oil surveys and territorial mapping. The region he was exploring in 1948 is now one of the most contested oil-producing areas in the Middle East." Lily felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You're saying his archaeological work was a cover?" "We're saying it was complicated," Morrison said. "And when he disappeared, several other people connected to the project also disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances. The official explanation was that the expedition ran into bad weather and got caught in tribal conflicts. But there were always questions." "Questions about what?" "About whether James Callaway actually died," Kim said bluntly, "or whether he went into hiding because he'd discovered something someone didn't want discovered." Lily's coffee had gone from cold to ice cold. "And you think the letter I translated, we think that letter might be the first concrete evidence that James Callaway survived past 1948, Morrison interrupted, "which would mean someone's been lying for 78 years about a matter that touches on international oil rights, treaty obligations, and potentially billions of dollars in contested assets." "That's insane." "Is it?" Kim leaned forward. "You're the one who said the verb tenses indicated ongoing events. What did you mean by that?" Lily's mind was racing. She thought this was about family secrets and old money, not federal investigations and oil rights. "The future conditional tense in that dialect," she said slowly, "is only used when you're talking about something that hasn't been resolved yet. It's like..." She struggled for an analogy. "It's like the difference between 'I was hungry' and 'I have been hungry.' One is finished, the other is still happening." "So whoever wrote that sentence," Morrison said, "was talking about a threat that was still active when they wrote it." "Yes, or they expected it to become active." "And the sleeping camel symbol you mentioned to Mr. Callaway's assistant," Kim said. "What does that mean?" Lily blinked. "How do you—" "Ms. Chen filed a preliminary report with the Foundation's legal team this morning. We have access to those filings." "That seems like it should require a warrant." "It would," Kim agreed, "if the Callaway Foundation wasn't already under federal scrutiny for other reasons." "What other reasons?" Morrison's expression hardened. "That's classified. What's not classified is that you've now inserted yourself into the middle of something much bigger than a translation challenge. And we need to know exactly what you told Ethan Callaway." "I told him what the sentence said, that's it." "And the sleeping camel?" Lily hesitated. This felt like a trap, but she didn't know enough to know how. "It's a symbol," she said finally. "In the shepherd's language, a sleeping camel can mean a resting place or a landmark. It's used in directions, like saying, 'Turn left at the big rock,' or 'Head north from the dead tree.' It's just a navigation marker." "But you didn't mention it last night," Kim pressed. "Why not?" "Because I wasn't sure if it was actually part of the text or just a decoration. Scribes used to add embellishments to make documents look more official. It might not mean anything. Or it might mean everything," Morrison said. "Ms. Bennett, I'm going to be very direct with you. Ethan Callaway is planning an expedition to the coordinates you helped him identify. We know this because his foundation filed permit applications with 3 different governments this morning. If he goes looking for his grandfather based on information in that letter, he's going to be walking into an area that's currently contested by 2 separate militias, 3 oil companies, and at least 1 foreign intelligence service that we know of. Durmasishti. Lily felt the blood drain from her face. I just translated a sentence. I didn't tell him to. You gave him hope, Kim interrupted, not unkindly. For a man like Ethan Callaway, who spent his whole life building his identity around his grandfather's legacy, that's more dangerous than any weapon. So stop him. We can't. He's a private citizen planning a legal expedition. We have no grounds. Then why are you telling me this? Kim and Morrison looked at each other again, and Lily was starting to hate that look. Because he's going to ask you to go with him, Morrison said. And when he does, we need you to say yes. The words hung in the air like a punch that hadn't landed yet. Excuse me? We need eyes on this expedition, Kim said. Someone who can report back on what they find. Someone Callaway trusts. He doesn't trust me. He just met me. He trusted you enough to offer you a consulting position worth $50,000 a week, Morrison countered. That's not standard operating procedure for someone you just met. Lily pushed back from the table. You want me to spy on him? We want you to keep us informed, Kim corrected. There's a difference. No, there really isn't. Lily stood up. I'm not doing this. I translated 1 sentence. That's all. I don't work for you, and I'm not going to. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it, but the caller ID said Ethan Callaway Private, and despite everything, she needed to hear what he had to say. She answered it. Ms. Bennett. Ethan's voice was calm, controlled, exactly like last night. I apologize for not returning your call sooner. I've been dealing with some unexpected complications. Yeah, me too. I'm aware that you've been contacted by federal agents. I'm also aware that you're currently sitting in a coffee shop with Agent Kim and Agent Morrison, who are going to try to convince you that I'm dangerous and that helping me is a national security risk. Lily glanced at Kim, who was watching her with an expression that gave nothing away. How do you cool? Because they've been investigating my foundation for 6 months, Ethan said. Ever since we started documenting discrepancies in historical oil treaties from the 1940s. They think I'm looking for evidence to support territorial claims that would undermine current drilling rights. They're wrong, but they don't believe me. Are they wrong? There was a pause. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was different, harder. My grandfather disappeared 78 years ago, and my family was told he died in a sandstorm. I grew up believing that. I built my entire career trying to preserve the kind of historical knowledge he died trying to document. And 3 months ago, I found evidence that everything I was told might be a lie. So no, Ms. Bennett, I'm not looking for oil rights. I'm looking for the truth about what happened to my family. If that makes me a national security risk, then the people defining national security have their priorities backwards. Manchete. Lily looked at Kim, at Morrison, at the coffee shop around her where college students were studying and young parents were managing toddlers, and life was just happening like none of this was real. What do you want from me? She asked Ethan. I'm flying to Amman tomorrow morning. From there, we'll travel to the border region where the coordinates you identified are located. I have permits, security personnel, and a full archaeological team. What I don't have is someone who can read the shepherd's language if we find more documents. I need you, Ms. Bennett, and I'm prepared to pay you $10,000 a day plus expenses for as long as you're willing to work with me. $10,000 a day. Lily did the math automatically. A week would be $70,000. A month would be... She stopped herself. Because this wasn't really about money anymore, was it? It's dangerous, she said. The agents here say there are militias. Foreign intelligence. There are, Ethan agreed, which is why I'm not asking you to make this decision lightly. I'm also not going to lie to you about the risks, but I'm going to tell you that this is the only chance I'll ever have to find out what really happened to my grandfather, and you're the only person who can help me do it. Kim was shaking her head, mouthing the word no. Morrison had pulled out a card and was writing something on it, and Lily was thinking about her father, about how he'd spent 15 years broken by a system that punished him for telling the truth while rewarding the man who stole from him, about how she'd spent her whole adult life being invisible because being visible was how you got hurt, about how she'd whispered one word last night and everything had changed anyway. "If I say yes," Lily said slowly, "I need to make arrangements for my mother. She needs full-time care, and I can't just leave her alone." "Done," Ethan said immediately. "I'll have a private nursing service at your apartment within 2 hours. Full medical support, 24-hour care, whatever she needs. And my father, also taken care of. Whatever he needs." Lily closed her eyes. "You're asking me to trust you, but I don't know you." "No," Ethan agreed. "But you know the language. You know what that letter says. And whether you trust me or not, don't you want to know if we're right? Don't you want to know what your father spent 20 years of his life documenting? What he lost everything trying to protect?" That was a low blow, and they both knew it. It was also effective. "I need 24 hours, Lily said. "You have 12. We leave tomorrow at 6 a.m. from Hanscom Field. If you're there, you're in. If you're not, I'll understand." He hung up. Lily set down her phone and looked at Kim and Morrison, who were both watching her with expressions that had moved past neutral into something more concerned. "Don't do this," Kim said quietly. "Please. We can protect you if you work with us. We can't protect you if you go with him." "You can't protect me either way," Lily said, "because if what you're saying is true, then there are people who've been lying about billions of dollars for almost 80 years, and they're not going to let some waitress from Dorchester get in their way whether I go to Jordan or stay home." Morrison pushed the card across the table. "If you change your mind, or if you need help." Lily took the card and left without touching her coffee. Outside, the reporters were gone. Apparently she'd stopped being interesting for the moment, or they'd followed some other lead. Small miracles. She walked home slowly, trying to organize her thoughts into something that made sense. Federal agents, international conspiracies, $10,000 a day to walk into a war zone with a billionaire she'd known for less than 24 hours. Her father would tell her she was insane. Her mother would tell her to be careful. And Lily was tired of being invisible. When she got back to the apartment, her mother was asleep again. Lily sat beside her bed and watched her breathe, the oxygen machine counting out steady rhythms. She'd been taking care of her mother for 3 years now, working 3 jobs, stretching every dollar, making decisions about which bills to pay and which medications they could afford. She loved her mother, but she was so tired, and $10,000 a day meant her mother would never have to worry about medical bills again. It also meant Lily might not come back. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her sleeping mother. "I'm so sorry." Then she pulled out her phone and called her father. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice rough. "Lily, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Dad, do you remember the shepherd's language, the dialect you studied before Damien destroyed my career?" Her father's laugh was bitter. "Yeah, I remember. Why?" "Last night I translated something, a letter, using what you taught me, and it was, Dad, you were right, about Damien, about everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about?" her father said finally, and his voice had changed, gotten quieter, more focused. Lily told him. About the challenge, the translation, the confrontation with Damien, about Ethan's offer and the FBI and the coordinates hidden in grammar. When she finished, her father was quiet for a long time. "Lily," he said finally, "that language, the work I did, it wasn't just academic research. There were people who didn't want that information preserved, people with money and power who benefited from that culture staying buried and forgotten. When I tried to publish, Damien wasn't working alone. He had backing, institutional support. They wanted to discredit me because what I documented threatened certain narratives about who owned what in that region. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I thought if I just stayed quiet and drunk and pathetic, they'd leave you alone. If you didn't know anything, you couldn't become a target." Lily felt something crack in her chest. "Dad, but you know now. And if you're asking my opinion about whether you should go with this Calloway guy, then you already know what you're going to do." "I don't. I really don't." "Really?" "Yes, you do. You're your father's daughter, Lily, which means you can't let this go any more than I could. The only difference is you're smarter than I was. You know what the cost might be." "What if I can't?" "You can," her father interrupted. "You translated that letter in front of 40 experts who said it was impossible. You stood up in front of people who've spent their entire lives making people like us feel small, and you proved them wrong. You're stronger than I ever was." Lily was crying now, quietly, trying not to wake her mother. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear keeps you careful. Just, Lily, if you do this, you call me. Every day. You understand? I don't care what time zone you're in. You call me every single day so I know you're alive. Okay? And Lily, be better than I was. Don't let them break you." They talked for another 20 minutes. Her father was sober, sharp, more like the man Lily remembered from childhood than the wreck he'd become. He gave her advice about the language, about what to look for, about the cultural context she might need. When they finally hung up, Lily felt steadier. Not certain, but steadier. She spent the rest of the day making arrangements. The nursing service Ethan had promised showed up at 3. 2 kind-looking women who seemed actually competent and not at all bothered by being hired on 12 hours' notice. They went through her mother's medications, her routines, her preferences. Lily's mother woke up halfway through the briefing, confused. "What's happening?" she asked. "Lily, why are there nurses?" "I have to go away for work, Mom. Just for a little while. These ladies are going to help you while I'm gone." "Go away where?" Lily hesitated. "Jordan. Maybe Syria. I'm helping someone with a research project." Her mother looked at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "You look like your father used to look. When he was excited about something, before everything, I know. Be careful, but go." "Mom." "Go, Lily. Some things are worth the risk." That night, Lily packed a bag with clothes she hoped would be appropriate for desert climates and archaeological sites. She had no idea what she was doing, had never traveled outside the Northeast, had never been on a plane before, had certainly never voluntarily walked into a situation that federal agents had warned her away from. But at 5:30 the next morning, she was standing outside Hanscom Field with her bag and her father's old notebook full of linguistic notes, watching a private jet being prepped for flight. Ethan was already there, talking to a woman in cargo pants and a tactical vest. When he saw Lily, he broke off the conversation and walked over. "You came," he said. "Yeah, well, I'm an idiot." "You're brave. There's a difference." He gestured toward the plane. "We have a full team. Security, medical support, archaeological specialists. You won't be alone in this." "Who's that?" Lily nodded toward the woman in the tactical vest. "Rachel Morrison. Former Special Forces, now head of security for the Foundation. She's ex-military, speaks 4 languages, and has more combat experience than everyone else on this plane combined. If something goes wrong, you listen to her." Comforting. Ethan almost smiled. "Come on, we have a long flight ahead of us." As Lily followed him toward the plane, she pulled out her phone and sent one last text to her father. "I'm getting on the plane. I'll call you when we land." His response came immediately. "Proud of you. Stay alive." The plane was smaller than Lily expected, but nicer than anything she'd ever seen. Leather seats, polished wood, a galley that looked like it belonged in an actual restaurant. There were 6 other people on board besides Ethan and Rachel. A pilot and co-pilot, an archaeologist named Dr. Sarah Chen, who looked annoyed to be there, a linguistics tech specialist named David Park, who seemed nervous, and 2 more security personnel who didn't introduce themselves. As the plane started to taxi, Lily strapped herself into a seat and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Ethan sat down across from her. "You okay? Ask me when we get back." "Fair enough." The plane lifted off, and Boston fell away beneath them. Lily watched the city shrink until it was just lights, and then nothing, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this terrified and this alive at the same time. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Ethan pulled out the letter, the original in its protective case, and set it on the table between them. "Tell me about the sleeping camel," he said. And despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty and the fact that she was flying toward something that might get her killed, Lily leaned forward and started talking about her father's research, about navigation symbols and dead languages and the truth that someone had tried very hard to bury. Outside the window, the sun was rising over an ocean that stretched toward a desert where 78-year-old secrets waited to either save them or destroy them. Lily figured she'd find out soon enough which one it would be. "The sleeping camel symbol," Lily explained as the plane cut through thin clouds somewhere over the Atlantic, wasn't just a decoration. In the shepherd's language, it served as what her father had called a compound marker, a symbol that modified the meaning of the text around it in specific ways. It's like punctuation, she said, tracing the tiny symbol with her finger through the protective sleeve. Except instead of just marking the end of a sentence, it changes how you read the geography. Ethan leaned closer, his scotch forgotten on the table. How? A camel standing means look up. Elevated terrain, mountains, high ground. A walking camel means follow the path. Established routes, trade roads. But a sleeping camel means dig down. Underground, buried, hidden beneath the surface. So the well isn't just beside something, Ethan said slowly. It's below something. Or it was covered up, deliberately hidden. Lily pulled out her father's notebook, flipping to a page covered in hand-drawn symbols. My father documented 17 variations of the camel symbol. The sleeping position specifically indicated artificial concealment, something humans buried, not just nature covering over time. Dr. Sarah Chen, the archaeologist, had wandered over during this explanation. She was in her mid-40s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of deep tan that came from years of field work. That's consistent with what we're seeing in the satellite imagery, she said, pulling out a tablet. Look here. She showed them a grainy aerial photo of what looked like nothing but sand and rocks. This is the primary coordinate Ms. Bennett identified. At first glance, it's just desert topography, but when we run it through ground-penetrating radar, she swiped to another image, this one showing colored heat signatures beneath the surface. We get this. There's a void space approximately 40 meters down. Could be a collapsed cave system, could be a dried aquifer, or something built, Ethan finished. Something built, Sarah agreed. She didn't sound happy about it. Mr. Calloway, I need to be clear with you. If there's actually a structure down there, and if it dates back to the time frame we're discussing, then we're looking at a significant archaeological site, which means permits, UNESCO oversight, probably a multi-year excavation process. I'm not running a multi-year excavation, Ethan interrupted. I'm looking for my grandfather, who may or may not be in a 78-year-old underground bunker in the middle of disputed territory. Sarah shot back. Have you actually thought about what we're going to find when we get there? Because the best case scenario is some old ruins and maybe some documentation. The worst case is that your grandfather really did die in 1948, and we're wasting time and resources and risking lives chasing a ghost. Then why did you agree to come? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. Because the linguistic evidence is compelling, and because I've spent 20 years excavating sites that other people decided were important, and just once I'd like to be first into something that actually matters. But that doesn't mean I'm comfortable with the way we're doing this. Noted, Ethan said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. Sarah gave him a long look, then returned to her seat at the front of the cabin. Lily watched her go. She's not wrong, you know, about the risks. I know. Ethan picked up his scotch again, then set it down without drinking. My daughter is 7 years old. Her name is Emma. She asks me about her grandfather, my father, all the time. What he was like, what kind of person he was. And I tell her stories about a man who died when I was 3 years old, so all I really have are other people's stories. But Emma's other grandfather, my grandfather James, she asks about him too. And all I've ever been able to tell her is that he was brave and died doing important work. He paused. I'd like to be able to tell her the truth, whatever that is. Even if the truth is that he abandoned his family and spent 78 years hiding from them? Even then, Ethan met her eyes. Wouldn't you want to know if it was your family? Lily thought about her father, broken and bitter in his studio apartment, about all the things he'd lost and all the questions he'd never gotten answers to. Yeah, she said quietly. I would. They flew through this night. Lily tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind too wired, too full of symbols and translations, and the growing certainty that she'd stepped into something much bigger than a family mystery. Around her, the other passengers dozed or worked on laptops or stared out windows at the darkness. Rachel Morrison, the security chief, spent most of the flight on a satellite phone, having terse conversations in what sounded like Arabic and maybe Farsi. When she finally ended the calls, she came over to where Ethan was reviewing satellite maps. We've got a problem, she said without preamble. Ethan looked up. How bad? Someone filed a competing permit application for the same coordinates. 3 hours ago. The Jordanian government is holding both applications pending review, which means we're going to be delayed in Amman while they sort it out. Who filed? Company called Meridian Heritage Solutions. Ever heard of them? Ethan's expression darkened. They're not a heritage company. They're a front for oil surveying operations. I've dealt with them before. They show up wherever there's a potential territorial dispute, file archaeological permits, then use the excavation rights to conduct geological testing. So someone knows we're coming, Lily said, and they know what we're looking for. Looks like it. Rachel's hand rested casually near her hip, where Lily could now see she was carrying a gun. I've got contacts in Amman who might be able to expedite our permits, but it's going to cost. And even if we get clearance, we need to assume that whoever filed that competing claim is going to be watching our movements. The FBI, Lily said suddenly. They knew Ethan was filing permits. What if they weren't the only ones paying attention? Ethan finished, which means either we have a leak in the foundation staff or someone's been monitoring our communications. Rachel nodded grimly. I've already switched us to encrypted channels, but if they've been listening for a while, they know enough. We should consider scrubbing the mission. No, Ethan said immediately. Mr. Calloway, I said no. We're not stopping now. Rachel's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Then we go in fast and quiet. Soon as we get clearance, we move. No delays, no sightseeing, no unnecessary risks. We get to the site, we see what's there, and we get out. Agreed? Ethan looked at Lily. You're still on board? She should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming that this was exactly the moment to back out, to admit this was beyond her, to go home and take the $10 million and disappear into a quiet, safe life. But she thought about her father's voice on the phone, sober and sharp for the first time in years, about the sleeping camel symbol that meant something was deliberately buried, about 78 years of lies. I'm in, she said. They landed in Amman 14 hours after leaving Boston. The city sprawled beneath them as they descended, ancient and modern all mixed together, pale stone buildings climbing hillsides, modern glass towers catching the late afternoon sun. The airport was chaos. Even with Ethan's money and connections, it took 2 hours to clear customs and get their equipment through security. Lily stuck close to Rachel, who moved through the crowds with the kind of purposeful efficiency that suggested she'd done this many times before. First time in the Middle East? Rachel asked as they waited for their bags. First time outside Massachusetts, Lily admitted. You picked a hell of a place to start. Stay close, don't make eye contact with anyone who looks official, and if something feels wrong, it probably is. You're really selling this experience. Rachel almost smiled. I like you. You're honest about being scared. That's smarter than pretending you're not. They were met outside the airport by 2 black SUVs and a driver who spoke rapid Arabic with Rachel. Whatever he said made her expression tighten. Change of plans, she announced to the group. Permits are being delayed pending additional review. Could be hours, could be days. We're going to a safe house to wait it out. Can't we just go anyway? David Park, the tech specialist, asked nervously. I mean, who's going to stop us in the middle of the desert? Border patrols, local militias, and the Jordanian military for starters, Rachel said flatly. We go without permits and will be arrested or shot. Possibly both. So we wait. The safe house turned out to be a nondescript apartment in a quieter part of the city, arranged through one of Rachel's contacts. It had 4 bedrooms, unreliable Wi-Fi, and bars on the windows. Lily claimed a corner of the living room and tried to call her father, but the connection kept dropping. She finally got through on the 3rd try. I'm in Jordan, she said when he picked up. We're delayed. Permit issues. Someone's blocking you. Her father's voice was tense. Lily, listen to me. If they know you're coming, they're going to try to get there first. The sleeping camel symbol, did you tell anyone besides Calloway what it means? The FBI knew, and his team. Then assume it's out there, and assume whoever's blocking your permits is already mobilizing. You need to move fast. We can't. Rachel says without permits, we'll be arrested. Rachel's thinking like someone who wants to follow the rules. But the people you're up against don't follow rules. They write them, then break them when it's convenient. Her father paused. There's another way to those coordinates. An old smuggler's route from the Iraqi side of the border. No checkpoints, no official oversight. Dangerous as hell, but it'll get you there. How do you know about smugglers' routes in Iraq? Because that's how I did my field research, Lily. The official channels were controlled by people who didn't want that dialect documented. So I went around them. He gave her a set of coordinates. There's a village called Al-Hasaka, about 40 kilometers from the Syrian border. Find a man named Yusuf al-Rahman. Tell him Marcus Bennett sent you. He'll get you across. Dad, I can't just... Yes, you can, and you will, because sitting in an apartment in Amman waiting for permits that will never come is exactly what they want you to do. By the time you get official clearance, the site will be stripped clean. Lily looked across the room to where Ethan was having a tense phone conversation with someone, probably his lawyers. Rachel was cleaning weapons at the kitchen table. Sarah was reviewing geological surveys with a frown. I'll talk to Ethan, Lily said. Be careful, and call me every day. I will. Dad? Thank you. Don't thank me yet, just stay alive. When Lily approached Ethan with her father's information, he listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Your father's suggesting we enter Iraq illegally, hire smugglers to cross into Syria, and conduct an unauthorized excavation in a war zone, he said finally. That's a pretty accurate summary, yeah. Rachel's going to hate this. Probably. Ethan looked at the coordinates Lily had written down. How well does your father know this Yusuf person? Well enough to trust him with his life, apparently. 20 years ago, anyway. 20 years is a long time. So is 78 years. Ethan almost smiled at that. Then he called Rachel over and explained the plan. Rachel's reaction was about what Lily expected. Absolutely not, she said flatly. No, we are not hiring smugglers to sneak us across international borders into active conflict zones. That's not security planning. That's suicide. You said yourself the permits aren't coming, Ethan countered. And you said whoever filed the competing claim is probably already moving. So what's our alternative? We go home. We regroup. We try again through official channels when things calm down. And give them time to get there first. Better than getting killed. Rachel's voice had risen slightly. Mr. Calloway, I signed on to provide security for a legitimate archaeological expedition. What you're proposing is different. It's illegal, it's reckless, and it puts everyone at risk. Then don't come, Ethan said quietly. I'll release you from your contract right now. Full pay, clean separation. But I'm going, with or without permits, with or without security. They stared at each other for a long moment. You're an idiot, Rachel said finally. Does that mean you're coming? It means I'm not letting you get yourself killed doing something stupid. But if this goes wrong, when this goes wrong, I get to say I told you so for the rest of your life, assuming we survive. Deal. Sarah Chen was less easily convinced. You're talking about conducting an illegal dig in a country that's technically still at war. We could start an international incident. We could get arrested. We could get people killed. I know, Ethan said. And you still want to do this? I need to do this. Sarah shook her head. I should walk away. I should get on the next plane back to Boston and report you to every archaeological ethics board that exists. But you're not going to. No, Sarah admitted. Because I'm apparently as stupid as you are. She pointed at Ethan. But we do this right. We document everything. We disturb as little as possible. And if we find something significant, we report it to the proper authorities before anyone loots it. Agreed? Agreed. David Park, when consulted, just looked terrified. I'm a tech guy. I set up satellite communications and data storage. I didn't sign up for illegal border crossings. You can stay here, Ethan said. No judgment. We'll make sure you get home safely. David looked at his laptop, then at the rest of the group, then back at his laptop. If I stay, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what you found. And that sounds worse than getting arrested. He swallowed hard. I'm in. But I want hazard pay. Done. They left Amman before dawn the next morning, taking back roads east toward the Iraqi border. Rachel had somehow acquired a different vehicle, an old Land Cruiser that looked like it had survived several wars, and forged transit documents that would get them through the first few checkpoints. After that, we're on our own, she said as they loaded equipment. No cavalry, no backup, no extraction plan if things go bad. Everyone clear on that? Murmurs of agreement. Lily noticed that Rachel had distributed weapons to her 2 security team members. The quiet men who still hadn't introduced themselves but who moved with the same lethal efficiency Rachel did. The drive to Al-Hasaka took 9 hours across roads that got progressively worse. They passed through checkpoints where bored soldiers glanced at their documents and waved them through. They drove through small towns that looked like they'd been bombed and rebuilt and bombed again. They saw children playing in rubble, and old men selling vegetables from carts, and women in headscarves walking with purpose toward destinations Lily couldn't guess. This was a different world, not just geographically, fundamentally. The rules were different, the stakes were different, and Lily was very aware that she was a long way from Boston. They reached Al-Hasaka in the late afternoon. It was larger than Lily expected, an actual town with markets and mosques and satellite dishes on roofs. Rachel parked the Land Cruiser in a dusty lot and told everyone to stay in the vehicle, except Lily. "You're the one with the connection," she said. "So you're coming with me. Everyone else, stay here, stay alert, and if we're not back in 2 hours, head for the border and don't look back." The market was crowded and loud. Lily followed Rachel through narrow streets that smelled like spices and exhaust, and something cooking that made her stomach growl. People stared at them. 2 Western women in tactical pants and hiking boots were apparently unusual enough to warrant attention. Rachel stopped at a tea shop and spoke in rapid Arabic to the owner, showing him something on her phone. The man's expression changed from suspicious to cautious. He gestured toward the back of the shop. Through a beaded curtain and down a narrow hallway, they found themselves in a small room where an elderly man sat smoking a water pipe. He looked up as they entered, his eyes sharp despite his age. Rachel spoke in Arabic. The man responded, back and forth for maybe 30 seconds. Then the man switched to English. "Marcus Bennett's daughter. I heard he had a child." His accent was thick but clear. "Heard also that he fell from grace, broken by thieves and liars." "You're Yusuf al-Rahman," Lily said. "I am, and you are far from home, seeking things that should perhaps stay buried." "My father said you could help us." "Your father said many things, some true, some wishful." Yusuf took a long pull from his pipe. "What makes you think I still run the old routes? I am old, tired. The wars have made everything more complicated." "Because if you'd stopped, you'd be dead or in prison," Rachel said bluntly. "Smugglers don't retire. They just get better at hiding." Yusuf's eyes crinkled with what might have been amusement. "You are military. American?" "Was. And now you work for rich men who chase ghosts in the desert." "Something like that." Yusuf looked at Lily. "Your father taught you the shepherd's language." It wasn't a question, but Lily answered anyway. "He did." "Then you know what you are looking for is more than one man's bones. The places where that language was spoken, they hold secrets that powerful people have worked very hard to erase. You go there, you disturb more than dust." "I know. Do you?" Yusuf set down his pipe. 20 years ago, your father came to me seeking the last speakers of a dying tongue. I took him into villages that foreign governments pretended did not exist. I introduced him to people who remembered when their land had different borders, different names, different owners. He documented their words, their stories, their claims to territories that oil companies now call their own. And when he tried to publish that truth, he was destroyed. Not killed, that would have been too obvious, but destroyed nonetheless. Lily felt something cold in her chest. "You're saying my father's research was suppressed because it proved indigenous land claims. I am saying that languages carry history, and history defines ownership, an ownership of desert land that sits on ocean of oil that is worth killing for, worth ruining careers for, worth burying truth for 78 years. Yusuf stood slowly, his joints creaking. "So before I take you to find what you seek, I ask you directly, are you prepared for what happens when you dig up that truth?" Lily thought about the FBI agents in the coffee shop, about Meridian Heritage Solutions filing competing permits, about Agent Kim's warning that Ethan would be walking into contested territory. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that staying silent hasn't helped anyone. My father stayed silent after they destroyed him, and it ate him alive. Those people you introduced him to, their stories stayed silent, and now they're almost gone. Maybe disturbing the dust is exactly what needs to happen." Yusuf studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You have your father's spine. He will be glad to know it did not break." He pulled out a satellite phone, incongruously modern in his weathered hands. I will take you, but not for money. I do this because Marcus Bennett was honest man in profession full of thieves, and his daughter deserves chance to be same. Also because I am old, and old men grow tired of watching lies win. How long until we can leave? Rachel asked. Tomorrow night. I need time to arrange vehicles, drivers, bribes for border patrols. You and your people, you stay out of sight until then. There are those who watch for foreigners with too much interest in old places. They returned to the Land Cruiser and drove to a compound on the edge of town that Yusef had arranged. It was Spartan, concrete walls, basic beds, a communal bathroom with water that ran lukewarm at best. But it was defensible, which Rachel seemed to care about more than comfort. Ethan paced the main room like a caged animal. Tomorrow night, that's too long. Every hour we wait is an hour we stay alive, Rachel interrupted. Yusef knows what he's doing. We wait. Lily called her father while there was still light. The connection was terrible, but she managed to tell him they'd found Yusef and were moving forward. Be smart, her father said through the static. And Lily, I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than she expected. When had he last said that? Before everything fell apart, probably. Before Damien and the plagiarism and the drinking. Thanks, Dad. I'll call you when I can. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot listening to unfamiliar sounds. Calls to prayer from distant mosques, dogs barking, vehicles passing on the road outside. Rachel was awake too, sitting by the window with a rifle across her lap, silhouetted against the starlight. You scared? Rachel asked without turning around. Terrified? Good. Fear's what keeps you breathing. It's the people who aren't scared who get killed. That's weirdly not comforting. Rachel did turn then, her face half in shadow. You don't belong here. You know that, right? You should be back in Boston counting your 10 million and living a normal life, but you came anyway. Why? Lily thought about how to answer that. Because being invisible was killing me slower than this probably will. At least this way I'm choosing the risk. That's either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? Rachel's teeth flashed white in the darkness, an actual smile. Yeah, it can be both. The next day crawled by. Sarah organized their equipment, making lists and checking gear with the kind of focused intensity that Lily was starting to recognize as her coping mechanism. David set up satellite communication systems and encrypted data backup. The security team, who Lily had finally learned were named Marcus and Jin, maintained weapons and studied maps. And Ethan sat with the letter, the original document he'd brought all this way, staring at it like it might suddenly reveal more secrets. Lily sat down across from him. You okay? I keep thinking about Emma. What I'd tell her if something happens to me out here. Nothing's going to happen. You don't know that, neither do I. He looked up. I've arranged for her guardianship to go to my sister if. And there's a trust that'll take care of her financially. But money isn't the same as having her father, Lily finished. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person here who's being completely honest about why they're doing this. Rachel's here because it's her job. Sarah's here for professional curiosity. David's here because he doesn't want to miss out. But you're here because you believe in what we're trying to do. That truth matters, that some things are worth the risk. I'm here because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what if, Lily corrected. That's not the same as bravery, isn't it? Before she could answer, Rachel appeared in the doorway. Yusef's here. We move in 30 minutes. The next half hour was controlled chaos. Packing equipment, loading vehicles, 2 trucks this time, older and more beat up than the Land Cruiser. Yusef had brought 3 other men, all of whom looked like they'd spent lifetimes moving things across borders that weren't supposed to be crossed. We go dark from here, Yusef said as they loaded the last of the gear. No phones, no GPS that can be tracked. We follow routes that do not appear on maps. If we are stopped, you are archaeologists with permits to survey Roman ruins. You know nothing of oil, nothing of borders, nothing of languages that should be forgotten. And if they don't believe us, David asked, then we hope they value bribes more than patriotism. They drove into the desert as the sun set, turning the sand into copper and gold. The landscape was beautiful and alien and absolutely unforgiving. No road now, just tire tracks in sand that shifted and changed with every wind. The trucks bounced over terrain that would have destroyed a normal vehicle, engines growling. Lily sat in the back of the second truck between boxes of equipment, watching the world turn dark. Above them, stars emerged in impossible numbers, bright and close and indifferent. Somewhere out here, if the letter was right, if the translations were accurate, if 78 years of lies were about to crack open, somewhere out here was the truth about James Calloway, and whatever else was buried with him. They drove through the night, stopping once to refuel from jerry cans and once when one of Yusef's men thought he spotted headlights in the distance. But the lights, if they'd been real, didn't follow, and they continued on. Dawn found them at what Yusef called the crossing point, a stretch of desert that looked like every other stretch of desert, except apparently this one had no military patrol and no official presence. "Syria," Yusef said, pointing east. "Another hour, maybe 2, we reach the coordinates your letter speaks of." Ethan pulled out a GPS unit that wasn't connected to any network. Pure navigation, untraceable. He checked their position against the numbers Lily had derived from the letter. "We're close," he said, and his voice was tight with something Lily couldn't quite name. Another 30 kilometers northeast. The sun was well up by the time they spotted it, a rock formation that rose from the desert like a sleeping animal. Even from a distance, Lily could see why it might have been called the sleeping camel. The rocks formed a shape that looked remarkably like a camel at rest, head tucked, legs folded beneath it. "There," she breathed. "That's it. That's the landmark." They approached slowly, carefully. Rachel had her weapons out, scanning the horizon for any sign they weren't alone. But the desert was empty, just sand and rock and heat already building toward unbearable. They parked in the shadow of the rock formation. Up close, it was massive, probably 40 feet tall, wind-carved limestone that had stood here for thousands of years. Sarah was already moving around it with instruments, scanning for the void space her satellite data had suggested. "Ground-penetrating radar confirms it," she said after several minutes. "There's definitely something down there. Looks like the entrance might be—" She moved around to the eastern side of the formation. "Here. There's a depression that could be a collapsed entrance." Everyone gathered at the spot she'd indicated. What had looked like just a natural dip in the sand showed different characteristics under Sarah's instruments. "This was filled in," she said. "Deliberately. Probably decades ago, but the density is all wrong for natural settling." "So we dig," Ethan said. "So we dig," Sarah agreed. They worked through the morning heat, taking turns with shovels, moving sand that had been hiding this entrance for longer than any of them had been alive. 3 feet down, they hit stone. Worked stone, carved and fitted together. "It's a door," Sarah said, her voice tight with excitement despite her earlier reservations. "Or it was. Looks like it collapsed inward at some point. By early afternoon, they'd cleared enough to reveal an opening, narrow, dark, leading down. Rachel went first with a flashlight and a weapon. Marcus and Jin followed. Then Rachel's voice echoed up. "Clear. There are stairs, old but stable." One by one, they descended into the earth. The stairs led down into darkness that seemed to swallow their flashlights. The air was cooler but stale, like breathing in time itself. Lily counted steps, 20, 30, 40. Finally, the stairs ended in a chamber. Rachel swept her light around, and Lily heard Sarah gasp. They were standing in an underground bunker. Not ancient, modern, or at least 20th century modern. There were electric lights that didn't work, banks of old computer equipment, filing cabinets, and tables covered in documents protected by plastic sheeting. And in the corner, barely visible in the flashlight beams, was a cot with what looked like a body lying on it. Ethan moved toward it like a man in a dream. Rachel grabbed his arm. "Wait, let me check it first." But Ethan pulled free and continued forward. He knelt beside the cot, and in the combined light of multiple flashlights, Lily could see what he was seeing. A skeleton, mostly. Clothed in what had once been khaki field clothes, a leather journal clutched to the chest, and on the skull, resting at an angle that suggested it had been placed there deliberately, a wide-brimmed hat of the style archaeologists wore in old photographs. "James Calloway," Ethan whispered, but he wasn't looking at the skeleton anymore. He was looking at the wall behind it, where someone had written in chalk, in English, in handwriting that was still legible despite the decades. "Forgive me. I stayed too long. The wolf found me. But the truth survives." J.C., 1952. 1952. Not 1948. James Calloway had lived 4 more years than anyone knew, and he died down here, in the dark, trying to protect something. Ethan's hands were shaking as he reached for the journal. Rachel stopped Ethan before his fingers touched the journal. "Don't, not yet. We document first." "That's my grandfather, and this is a 70-year-old crime scene," Rachel said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Sarah, get your cameras. David, I need you recording everything. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." For a moment, Lily thought Ethan might argue. His jaw was tight, his hands still reaching toward the skeletal remains of a man he'd never met but had built his entire identity around. Then he pulled back, nodding stiffly. "Fine. Document everything." Sarah moved forward with her camera, photographing the body from every angle. The flash created stark shadows in the underground chamber, making the skeleton look even more fragile, more real. David set up video equipment, his hands shaking slightly as he worked. Lily stayed back, giving them room, but her eyes were adjusting to the darkness enough to see more of the bunker. The filing cabinets lining the walls, the old computer terminals that looked like they belonged in a museum, stacks of papers and maps and what looked like geological surveys. And on the far wall, partially hidden by shadows, something that made her breath catch. "There's writing," she said, moving closer with her flashlight. "The shepherd's language. It's everywhere." The wall was covered in it. Neat rows of symbols and characters, written in what looked like chalk or charcoal, filling every available surface. Some of it was the same dialect from the letter, but some of it was different, related but distinct, like different accents of the same language. "Can you read it?" Ethan asked, coming to stand beside her. "Some of it. It's like..." Lily traced one line with her finger, careful not to touch the actual writing. "It's a record. Names, dates, locations. He was documenting something. The speakers, maybe? The last people who knew this language? Why would he hide that down here?" "I don't know. Unless..." Lily moved to another section, where the writing was denser, more urgent-looking. "Unless he was documenting something else, something people didn't want documented." She started reading aloud slowly, translating as she went. August 1949. Met with tribal elder Rashid ibn Khalil. He confirms the southern boundary markers correspond to pre-1920 territorial claims. The oil surveys being conducted by Anglo-Persian are deliberately ignoring these ancestral boundaries. When confronted, the company representative threatened violence if the information was published. Ethan had gone very still beside her. "Keep going." November 1949. 3 of my informants have disappeared. Local authorities claim they relocated voluntarily, but their families report men in Western clothes came asking questions about the old languages, the old treaties. "I'm moving the documentation underground. If anything happens to me, at least the record will survive." Lily's voice faltered. She moved to the next section. March 1950. My brother visited. He's not really my brother anymore. They've gotten to him. The wolf in shepherd's clothing. He says the family is worried that I should come home, that this research isn't worth the risk. But I can see it in his eyes. He knows what I've found. He knows it threatens everything the foundation has built. He didn't say the words, but I heard them anyway. Stop digging or disappear. His brother, Ethan said, his voice hollow. That would be... Your great-uncle, Sarah finished, coming over to join them. Thomas Calloway. He ran the foundation after James disappeared. After James was murdered, Ethan corrected, staring at the wall. Because that's what this is, isn't it? My grandfather didn't die in a sandstorm. He was killed by his own brother to protect oil interests. We don't know that for certain, Rachel cautioned. But Lily was already reading the next section, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. May 1952. He found me. Thomas found me. Not by accident. Someone told him where to look. He came with 2 others, men I didn't recognize. They said if I gave them the documentation, the treaties, the linguistic evidence, they'd let me live. I told them it was already too late, that I'd sent copies to universities, to newspapers, to anyone who would listen. Thomas smiled. He said they'd been intercepted, every copy, every letter, every photograph. Then he asked if I had any final words for my family. I told him they should beware the wolf beside the well. The writing stopped there. The rest of the wall was blank. The silence in the bunker was absolute. Even the sound of their breathing seemed too loud. Finally, Ethan spoke. He wrote that letter knowing he was about to die, knowing his brother was about to kill him, and he made it cryptic enough that Thomas wouldn't understand it, but specific enough that someday someone might. Someone who knew the shepherd's language, Lily said. Someone who would recognize the warning. My father never mentioned any of this, Ethan said. Never said a word about his uncle being involved in his grandfather's death. Either he didn't know, or he was protecting the family reputation, Sarah finished. Mr. Calloway, do you understand what we're standing in? This isn't just about your grandfather anymore. This is evidence of corporate conspiracy, murder, and the systematic suppression of indigenous land claims. If we bring this to light, we have to bring it to light, Ethan interrupted. That's not a question. It should be, Rachel said sharply, because the people who killed James Calloway are either dead or very old, but the institutions they protected are very much alive, and they have lawyers and money and connections that we don't. You go public with this. You're declaring war on some very powerful interests. Good, Ethan said, and there was steel in his voice now. Because they killed my grandfather and lied about it for 78 years. I'm done protecting the family reputation. I'm done pretending the Foundation's legacy is anything other than blood money. Marcus, one of the security team members who rarely spoke, cleared his throat. We've got movement outside, 2 vehicles approaching from the west, maybe 3 kilometers out. Everyone went still. How many people? Rachel asked, already moving toward the stairs. Can't tell from here, but they're coming fast. Meridian Heritage, Ethan said grimly. They knew we were coming. Or someone told them, Rachel countered. She turned to her team. Jin, Marcus, defensive positions at the entrance. Everyone else, start packing up everything we can carry. Documents, the journal, anything that proves what happened here. We've got maybe 15 minutes before they arrive. We can't leave him, Ethan said, looking at his grandfather's remains. We don't have a choice. I'm not leaving him down here to be buried again, not after... Ethan's voice cracked. Not after everything. Sarah put a hand on his arm. We'll take the journal, the documents, the physical evidence. That's what matters. That's what he died protecting. He matters too. I know. But the living matter more right now, and if we don't move, we're all going to end up staying here with him. That seemed to get through. Ethan grabbed the journal from his grandfather's skeletal hands, careful, reverent, and then started helping David collect papers from the filing cabinets. Lily went to the wall and started photographing the writing with her phone, knowing that pictures might be all they'd get. Sarah was doing the same with a professional camera, moving methodically along the walls, capturing every line of text. There are treaties here, she said, her voice tight with excitement despite the urgency. Actual physical treaties signed in the 1920s and 30s. These define territorial boundaries that would completely change current oil extraction rights. If these are authentic, they're authentic, Lily said, reading another section, and they're explosive. This one gives water rights to 3 tribal groups that currently have no legal claim to the aquifers beneath their land. And this one, she stopped, her blood running cold. This one was signed by representatives from Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire in 1919. It was supposed to be registered with the League of Nations, but was never filed. Someone buried it. How much is this worth? David asked, shoving papers into a waterproof bag. Billions, Sarah said flatly. Maybe tens of billions if the territorial claims hold up in international court. No wonder someone wanted it buried. Rachel appeared at the bottom of the stairs, breathing hard. They're here. 4 vehicles, maybe 15 people, all armed. They're setting up a perimeter. Can we get past them? Ethan asked. Not in the trucks. They've got us boxed in. Then we go out the back, Lily said. Everyone turned to look at her. There has to be another exit. James couldn't have survived down here for 4 years without ventilation, without supplies. There has to be another way in and out. Sarah's eyes widened. She's right. A bunker this size would need multiple access points. Start looking for... Here, Jin called from the far corner. He'd moved a stack of crates aside, revealing another doorway, narrower than the main entrance. Tunnel. Heads east. How far does it go? Rachel asked. Only one way to find out. They could hear voices now from above, shouting in Arabic and English. Someone had found the entrance they'd dug out. Move, Rachel ordered. Now, take everything you can carry and go. I'll hold them off long enough for you to get clear. You're not staying here alone, Ethan said. I'm not asking permission. Rachel checked her weapon. Marcus Jin, you're with me. Everyone else goes. That's an order. Rachel, Mr. Calloway, I was hired to keep you alive. That's what I'm doing. Now go before I have to shoot you myself to keep you from being stupid. There was no time to argue. Ethan grabbed as many documents as he could carry. Sarah took the camera and her equipment. David had 2 bags of papers and drives. Lily had her phone full of photographs and her father's notebook and the journal clutched to her chest. They ran into the tunnel. Behind them, Lily heard the first gunshots. Not close, but not far enough away either. Rachel's voice shouting orders. Return fire. The tunnel was narrow and dark and seemed to go on forever. They ran with flashlights bouncing, stumbling over loose rocks, the bags of documents banging against their legs. Lily's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and she hadn't come all this way to die in a hole in the desert. After what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, the tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was smaller, rougher, more cave than bunker. And at the far end, daylight leaked through cracks in a collapsed ceiling. There, Sarah gasped, pointing. We can climb out through that. They scrambled up the rubble, pushing and pulling each other, dropping documents and having to go back for them. The gunfire behind them had intensified. Lily tried not to think about Rachel and her team, tried not to imagine what was happening back in that bunker. They emerged into blinding sunlight on the far side of the sleeping Camel Rock Formation. Youssef was there with one of the trucks, engine running. Get in, he shouted. Now! They threw themselves and the bags into the truck bed. Youssef didn't wait for them to settle before flooring it, the truck bouncing violently over the desert terrain. Rachel, Ethan said, trying to stand up in the moving truck. We have to go back. She told us to run, Sarah said, pulling him down. So we run. I'm not leaving her. You are if she died buying us time to escape. Don't make it meaningless. The truck crested a rise, and Lily looked back. She could see the sleeping camel formation, could see vehicles clustered around it, could see figures emerging from the entrance, 3 of them, running toward a vehicle. They made it, Lily said, her voice breaking with relief. I see them. They're out. But even as she said it, she saw more figures pouring out of the entrance, giving chase. And the figures in front, Rachel's team, they were moving wrong. One of them was limping, another was being half carried. Youssef saw it too. He swore in Arabic and yanked the wheel, turning the truck back toward the rock formation. What are you doing? David yelped. Leaving no one behind, Youssef said grimly. Hold on. The truck bounced and skidded across the sand. They were closing the distance. Lily could see Rachel now, could see Marcus dragging Jin, could see blood. Youssef brought the truck alongside them. Rachel didn't hesitate. She shoved Jin into the truck bed, then Marcus, then hauled herself up. She had blood on her face and her left arm hung at an odd angle. Drive, she shouted. Youssef drove. Behind them, their pursuers had reached their own vehicles. Engines roared to life. They're following, David said, stating the obvious in a voice pitched high with fear. How many vehicles? Rachel asked, trying to tie a tourniquet around Jin's leg with her good hand. Lily moved to help her. 3, maybe 4. And we have 1 truck and a head start that's disappearing fast. Rachel looked at Ethan. The documents. Did we get them? Most of them, maybe 60%. It'll have to be enough. She turned to Youssef. How far to the border? Too far. They will catch us before we cross. Then we need a different plan. I am open to suggestions. Rachel looked around the truck bed, at the injured men, at the civilians who weren't trained for this, at the bags of 78-year-old papers that people were willing to kill for. Her expression was grim. We split up, she said. They can't chase everyone. Youssef, you take the main road with the wounded. Draw them off. We'll go cross-country with the documents. On foot in the desert, Sarah said, we'll die of exposure before sunset. Not if we're fast and smart. Rachel pulled out a GPS unit. There's a village about 15 kilometers northeast, small enough to disappear in, close enough to reach before dark if we move. They won't expect us to split up. That's because it's insane, David said. You have a better idea. Now's the time. No one did. Yusuf slowed the truck just enough for them to jump out without breaking bones. Rachel went first despite her injured arm, then helped the others down. Ethan, Sarah, Lily, David, all of them tumbling into the sand with bags of documents and equipment. Yusuf, Rachel called up to him. Get them to safety. We'll make contact when we can. Yusuf nodded once, his face set. Then the truck was accelerating away, kicking up a plume of dust that temporarily hid them from the pursuing vehicles. Move, Rachel said. Northeast, stay low. Don't bunch up. If they have long-range weapons, I don't want us all taken out with one shot. They moved, running at first, then jogging when the sand and heat made running impossible. The bags were heavy, the sun was brutal. Lily's mouth went dry within minutes, and they'd barely brought any water. Behind them, the sound of engines faded as the pursuit followed Yusuf's truck. Rachel's gamble had worked. For now. But they were still in the middle of a desert with limited supplies, no real plan, and bags full of documents that proved powerful people had committed murder and fraud. How's your Arabic? Rachel asked Lily as they trudged through the sand. Non-existent. I know some written dialects but can't speak modern Arabic. Perfect. So we have no translator, limited water, no extraction plan, and we're in a country where we're not supposed to be. Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter. This is officially the worst op I've ever been on, and I once got shot in Kandahar. We could bury the documents, David suggested, mark the location, come back later, and trust that someone else won't find them first. Ethan shook his head. No, we carry them out, or we die trying. I vote for carrying them out, Sarah said, just for the record. They walked for hours. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Lily's shirt was soaked with sweat. Her legs felt like they might give out at any moment. The bag she was carrying seemed to gain weight with every step. But she kept moving. They all did. Rachel checked her GPS periodically, making small course corrections. Village should be over the next rise, she said when the sun was starting to descend. Another 30 minutes, maybe? They crested the rise and found themselves looking down at a small cluster of buildings nestled in a valley. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Children played in the dusty street. It looked almost normal. We need a story, Sarah said. We can't just walk in there covered in blood and carrying stolen documents. Archaeologists, Ethan said. Our vehicle broke down. We're looking for water and a way to contact our university. And the blood? David asked, gesturing to Rachel's arm and the stains on her clothes. Accident. Cave collapse. We were exploring ruins. It was thin. It probably wouldn't hold up under scrutiny, but it was what they had. They walked into the village as the sun was setting. People stared at them. 5 Westerners stumbling out of the desert wasn't exactly a common sight. An elderly man approached, speaking in rapid Arabic. Rachel responded in what little Arabic she knew. The man frowned, then called out to someone else. A younger woman emerged from one of the buildings, her headscarf bright against the dusty surroundings. She spoke English, accented but clear. You're lost? Our vehicle had trouble, Ethan said, falling into the lie easily. We're researchers from Boston University conducting archaeological surveys. We need water and access to communications if possible. The woman studied them for a long moment. Her eyes lingered on the bags they were carrying, on Rachel's makeshift tourniquet, on the way they all looked ready to collapse. You are running from something, she said. Not a question. Lily found herself speaking before she could think better of it. Yes, from people who don't want the truth to be known. What truth? Lily pulled out James Calloway's journal, held it up. That this man was murdered for documenting indigenous land claims, that his death was covered up, that the languages and treaties he tried to preserve were deliberately destroyed to justify theft. The woman's expression didn't change. And you think bringing old papers to a village in the middle of nowhere will change this? No, Lily admitted. But running seemed better than dying. Something in the woman's face shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. My grandmother spoke one of the old languages. Before the borders came, before the companies came, before speaking the old words became dangerous. She paused. What you carry, it is proof of what was taken? Yes. The woman looked at the villagers who had gathered around them. An entire conversation seemed to happen in that glance, though no words were spoken. Then she turned back to them. You can stay. Tonight only. Tomorrow you must go. But tonight, you are guests. They were given food, simple but welcome after hours in the desert. Water. A place to wash. The woman, whose name was Amira, brought them to a small building at the edge of the village. My cousin's house, she explained. He is away. You will not be disturbed. Thank you, Ethan said. We'll pay you. You will not. Amira's voice was firm. My grandmother died still speaking words that no one else understood, because people like those you run from decided her language was inconvenient. If what you carry honors her memory, then that is payment enough. After she left, they collapsed. Even Rachel, who seemed like she could run forever, sat heavily against a wall. We need to get Jin real medical attention, she said. The tourniquet's holding, but he needs antibiotics, probably surgery, and my arm is either broken or badly sprained. How far to proper medical care? Ethan asked. In Jordan? A day, maybe 2 if we can get transport. In Iraq? Who knows? Syria? Rachel shook her head. We're in the middle of nowhere, Mr. Calloway. Medical care isn't exactly the priority right now. Survival is. Sarah had spread out the documents they'd rescued on the floor, organizing them carefully. We need to photograph everything, she said. Get it digitized and uploaded before something happens to the physical copies. David, can you... On it, David said, already pulling out his equipment. I can create an encrypted backup and store it on multiple servers. If the documents are destroyed, at least we'll have the evidence. They worked through the evening, David scanning documents, Sarah cataloging them, Lily translating the sections in the shepherd's language, creating a comprehensive record of what James Calloway had documented. And Ethan sat with his grandfather's journal, reading it page by page, his expression growing harder with each entry. Finally, he looked up. My great-uncle Thomas didn't just kill my grandfather. He built the entire modern foundation on the documents he stole, the cultural preservation initiatives, the historical archives, the academic grants. All of it was funded by oil money from wells that were drilled on stolen land. My family's entire legacy is built on a lie. What are you going to do? Lily asked quietly. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he said, I'm going to burn it all down. The foundation, the reputation, everything. I'm going to tell the truth, even if it destroys us. That's a lot to sacrifice, Sarah said. My grandfather sacrificed his life for this truth. The least I can do is sacrifice my family's reputation. Lily thought about her own father, about what he'd lost trying to tell a truth that no one wanted to hear, about how satisfying it would be to finally have proof that he'd been right all along. When we get out of here, she said to Ethan, I want you to meet my father. I think you two would understand each other. When we get out, Ethan agreed, not if. But as night fell over the small village, Lily found herself wondering if when was realistic. They were still in Syria, still being hunted, still carrying documents that powerful people would kill to suppress. Rachel must have seen something in her expression because she said, We're going to make it. I've gotten people out of worse situations than this. Have you? No, Rachel admitted. But saying it makes me feel better. Despite everything, Lily laughed. It felt good to laugh, even in the middle of this disaster. They took turns sleeping, keeping watch in shifts. When it was Lily's turn, she sat by the window and stared out at the desert stars. The same stars James Calloway must have seen when he was hiding in his bunker, documenting his brother's betrayal. The same stars that had watched this land change hands and names and borders, while the people who actually belonged here were erased from the official records. Her phone buzzed. Somehow, impossibly, there was a weak signal. A text from her father. Still alive. She typed back, For now. We found him. Found everything. You were right about all of it. The response came quickly. I knew I was right. Knowing and proving are different. You're proving it. I'm proud of you. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time her father had said he was proud? When was the last time he'd been sober enough to mean it? Another text. Come home safe. We have a lot to talk about. I will, Lily typed back. Then, because she might not get another chance, I love you, Dad. I love you too. Now stop texting and stay alive. She smiled through the tears and pocketed her phone. Outside, the desert was quiet. But somewhere out there, people were still looking for them. And when the sun came up, they'd have to figure out how to get home with the evidence that could change everything. Assuming they lived that long, dawn came too fast and brought trouble with it. Lily was shaken awake by Rachel, whose face was grim in the early light. "We've got company. 3 vehicles just pulled into the village. They're asking questions." Ethan was already up, stuffing documents back into bags with mechanical efficiency. Sarah was helping David pack up the scanning equipment, moving fast but careful. Outside, Lily could hear voices, Amira speaking in rapid Arabic, a man's voice responding in accented English. "How did they find us?" David whispered, his hand shaking as he disconnected cables. "Doesn't matter," Rachel said. "What matters is getting out before they search this building. There's a back exit. We go now, we might have a 5-minute head start." "Where do we go?" Sarah asked. "We're in the middle of nowhere. We can't outrun vehicles on foot again." Rachel pulled out her satellite phone. "We don't run. We call for help. Real help this time." "Who?" Ethan asked. "Everyone. News organizations, human rights groups, the UN, every contact I have. We flood the zone with attention, make this so public that they can't just disappear us quietly." "That'll take time we don't have," Lily said. "Then we buy time." Rachel checked her weapon. Her good arm was functional even if the broken one wasn't. "Marcus is still out there with Yusuf. If we can get a signal to them, they can create a distraction, draw the search away from us." The voices outside were getting closer. Lily heard footsteps, the sound of doors being opened, and searched. "Back exit, now," Rachel ordered. They slipped out through a narrow doorway that led into an alley behind the building. The morning air was already hot, the sun climbing fast. Lily's bag of documents felt like it weighed 100 pounds. They moved quickly through the back streets of the village, trying to stay out of sight. But in a village this small, 5 foreigners weren't exactly inconspicuous. People stared, children pointed. An old man sitting outside his door watched them pass with knowing eyes. Rachel led them to the edge of the village, where the buildings gave way to open desert again. "We need to get to higher ground," she said, scanning the terrain. "Somewhere we can see them coming and defend if necessary." "Defend?" David's voice cracked. "With what? You've got 1 working arm and 1 gun. They've got vehicles and probably a lot more firepower." "Then we better hope it doesn't come to a firefight." Rachel pulled out the satellite phone and started making calls. First call went to a number in Washington. Rachel spoke quickly, urgently. "This is Morrison. Asset number 773. I need immediate extraction from Syria." "Yes, Syria. I know the optics are bad. I don't care. We have critical intelligence related to the Callaway investigation. Multinational corporate fraud, murder, suppressed indigenous land claims. We have physical evidence and we're being actively pursued by hostile forces. I need extraction and I need international media coverage to keep us alive long enough to get it." Lily couldn't hear the response, but Rachel's expression suggested it wasn't encouraging. "I understand the complications," Rachel said tersely. "But if we die out here with this evidence, you lose the only concrete proof of oil treaty fraud in the region. So either send extraction or explain to Congress why you let American citizens get killed protecting evidence of corporate war crimes." She paused. "That's what I thought. We'll send coordinates. You have 4 hours before we're either captured or dead." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. This time her tone changed, less military, more personal. "Jake, it's Rachel. I need a favor, a big one." She explained the situation in quick, efficient terms. "Can you get Guardian or Reuters on this?" "Good. Tell them we have documents proving the Callaway Foundation was built on stolen land claims and that James Callaway was murdered by his own brother in 1952. Yes, murdered. We have the body, the journal, the whole thing. If they want the story, they need to put eyes on us. Make us too visible to kill quietly." She made 6 more calls. Human rights organizations, independent journalists, academic institutions, each time laying out the same basic facts: evidence of historical fraud, murder, suppression of indigenous rights, currently being pursued by unknown hostile forces in Syria. By the time she finished, they'd moved to a rocky outcrop that gave them a view of the village and the desert beyond. Lily could see the vehicles that had arrived, expensive SUVs that looked out of place in this rural setting. Men in tactical gear searching buildings systematically. "How long until help arrives?" Ethan asked. "If we're lucky, 4 hours. If we're not, Rachel shrugged with her good shoulder. We might be on our own. Then we make a stand here, Ethan said. We've got high ground, visibility, and evidence worth protecting. We've got 5 people, limited water, and 1 weapon, Sarah corrected. That's not making a stand. That's dying slowly. You got a better idea? Before Sarah could answer, Lily's phone buzzed. Another text from her father, but this one was different. I just got a call from a reporter at the Globe. She's asking about indigenous land treaties and the Callaway Foundation. What's happening? Lily looked at Rachel. My father, the media's already calling him. Good, Rachel said. That means word is spreading. The more people who know what we've found, the harder it becomes to bury us along with the evidence. Lily typed back quickly. Long story. But yes, we found proof of everything you suspected. Tell the reporter everything you know about the shepherd's language research, about how Damien stole your work, about why those dialects were being suppressed. Make it public. Her father's response. This will destroy what's left of my reputation. They'll say I'm bitter, making things up. Or they'll finally admit you were right all along. Your choice, Dad, but I'm choosing to fight. There was a long pause, then, okay, I'll talk to them. Be safe, Lily. You too. Movement in the village below. The men in tactical gear had stopped searching buildings and were gathering at the edge of town, pointing toward the outcrop where Lily and the others were hiding. They found us, David said, his voice tight with fear. Of course they did, Rachel said. We left tracks. Question is what they do now. The answer came quickly. 2 of the vehicles started moving, heading toward their position. Defensive positions, Rachel ordered. Stay low, stay quiet. Let me do the talking if it comes to that. They crouched behind rocks, watching the vehicles approach. Lily's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. This was it. This was where they either survived or became another buried story. The vehicles stopped about 50 meters away. Doors opened. 4 men emerged, all armed. But they didn't advance immediately. Instead, one of them raised a megaphone. Mr. Callaway, we know you're up there. We know what you took from the bunker. We're prepared to negotiate. Ethan looked at Rachel, who shook her head. Don't answer. Let them make the first move. We're not here to hurt anyone, Sveising, the voice continued. We just want the documents. Return them and you can walk away. They're lying, Rachel said quietly. The moment we hand over the evidence, we're loose ends. What if we don't have a choice? David asked. We always have a choice. The choice right now is whether we die for nothing or die making sure the truth survives. Those are both terrible choices, Sarah muttered. But before anyone could respond, Lily heard something. A distant mechanical sound, growing louder. Helicopter rotors. Everyone looked up. 2 helicopters were approaching from the north, flying low and fast. Military aircraft, from the look of them. The men below saw them too. The one with the megaphone lowered it, speaking urgently into a radio. Is that our extraction? David asked hopefully. Rachel was watching the helicopters with an expression Lily couldn't read. Maybe, or maybe we just went from bad to worse. The helicopters circled once, then set down in a clear area between the outcrop and the village. Soldiers emerged. Lily counted 8 of them, all armed, all moving with professional precision. And behind them, a woman in civilian clothes who looked familiar. That's Agent Kim, Lily said, recognizing the FBI agent from the coffee shop in Boston. From the investigation. She came herself? Ethan sounded surprised. Or she was already here, Rachel said. This region has been crawling with intelligence personnel for months. The question is whose side she's on. The tactical team that had been approaching their position had stopped, uncertain. Agent Kim walked past them like they were irrelevant, heading straight for the outcrop. When she was close enough to be heard without shouting, she stopped. Mr. Callaway? Ms. Bennett, I need you to come down, all of you. We're offering protective custody and safe passage out of Syria. In exchange for what? Ethan called back. In exchange for your cooperation with an ongoing federal investigation into international oil fraud and the Meridian Heritage Corporation. And the documents we recovered will be entered into evidence, properly documented, authenticated, and used to build cases against everyone involved in the suppression of indigenous land claims and the murder of James Callaway. Rachel leaned close to Ethan. She's offering witness protection, basically. It's a good deal, better than dying on a rock in Syria. But can we trust her? Lily asked. Can we trust anyone? Rachel countered. But right now she's offering extraction and federal protection. That's better odds than we have alone. Ethan looked at the journal in his hands, his grandfather's final words, then at the bags of documents they'd nearly died retrieving, then at the team who'd followed him into this disaster. We come down, he called to Kim. But the documents stay in our possession until we're on American soil, and we get legal representation before we agree to anything. Kim nodded. Acceptable. Come down slowly. Keep your hands visible. The descent from the outcrop felt surreal. Lily kept expecting someone to start shooting, for this to be a trap, for everything to fall apart. But the soldiers maintained a professional perimeter, and Kim waited patiently as they picked their way down the rocky slope. When they reached the bottom, Kim's expression was unreadable. You've caused an international incident. You know that, right? We found evidence of murder and fraud, Ethan said flatly. If that causes an incident, the incident was earned. The Syrian government wants you arrested for illegal border crossing and unauthorized excavation. The Jordanian government wants answers about forged permits. The Iraqi government doesn't know you were there but will be upset when they find out. And Meridian Heritage has 3 different law firms demanding your arrest for theft and destruction of property. Good, Ethan said. Let them demand. We have evidence that proves their entire operation is built on forged land claims and suppressed indigenous rights. Kim's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. I know. That's why I'm here. Get in the helicopters. We'll debrief once you're safe. The flight to the American consulate in Erbil took 90 minutes. Lily spent most of it staring out the window at the desert passing below, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. She'd gone from being an invisible waitress in Boston to being in a military helicopter fleeing hostile forces with evidence of a 78-year-old murder. Her phone buzzed with messages as they gained altitude and signal. Her father, her mother's nurses. News alerts about developing story regarding historical foundation fraud. The world was already reacting to what they'd found, and they hadn't even made it home yet. At the consulate, they were separated for debriefing. Lily spent 4 hours in a small room with Agent Kim and a stenographer, walking through everything. The translation challenge, the letter, the coordinates, the bunker, the documents, James Calloway's body, and his final message. Your father's research, Kim said at one point, the work that was suppressed and stolen. Do you still have access to it? Some of it. He kept copies even after everything fell apart, but a lot of it was lost. We'll need everything he has. It corroborates what you found in the bunker, proves that the language suppression was systematic and deliberate. Will this clear his name? Lily asked. My father's name? Kim hesitated. That's not my department, but if what you're telling me is accurate and the documents support it, then yes, it should lead to a reevaluation of what happened to him. No promises, but it's possible. Possible. After 15 years of being branded a plagiarist and a fraud, her father might finally get possible. It wasn't justice, but it was more than they'd had yesterday. The debriefing with Ethan took longer. Lily saw him briefly in a hallway. He looked exhausted, hollowed out, but also somehow lighter. Like a weight he'd been carrying his whole life had finally been set down. They want me to testify, he said. Grand jury, probably multiple trials. It's going to take years to sort through all the claims and counterclaims. What about Emma? Lily asked. Your daughter. I called her. She's safe with my sister. When I told her we found her great-great-grandfather, you know what she asked? She asked if he was a good person. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. I gotta tell her yes, that he died trying to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's a better story than I thought I'd ever be able to give her. They flew back to the States 2 days later on a military transport. Rachel's arm had been set properly at the consulate. Jen had been transferred to a military hospital in Germany for surgery. Marcus had made it out with Yusuf. They'd led the pursuit on a wild chase through the desert before finally escaping across the Iraqi border. The documents traveled with them in sealed containers, officially entered into federal evidence. Sarah had spent 12 hours documenting and photographing everything before they were sealed, creating a comprehensive academic record that she swore she'd publish regardless of what happened legally. Landing at Andrews Air Force Base felt anticlimactic. Lily had expected media, drama, something. Instead, they were quietly transferred to a nondescript government facility for additional debriefing and medical evaluation. It was 3 more days before Lily was finally released. By then, the story had broken publicly. Major news organizations were running pieces about James Calloway's murder, about suppressed land treaties, about corporate fraud spanning 8 decades. The Calloway Foundation had suspended operations pending investigation. Meridian Heritage's stock had plummeted. 3 board members had already resigned. And Damian Whitmore had been arrested on multiple fraud charges after investigators discovered he'd been selling access to improperly obtained archaeological sites for years. Lily's father was waiting for her when she finally walked out of the federal building. He looked better than she'd seen him in years, sober, shaved, wearing clean clothes. When he saw her, his face crumpled. Lily. He pulled her into a hug that smelled like coffee and laundry detergent instead of whiskey. I thought I'd lost you. I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay. You're incredible is what you are. I've had 6 different universities call me in the past week. They want me to consult on language preservation projects. The Globe printed a front-page piece about the Shepherd's language research. They called it groundbreaking work that was criminally suppressed. He pulled back to look at her. You did that. You proved I wasn't crazy. You proved yourself, Dad. I just helped people listen. Her mother was recovering at home with the nursing team Ethan had arranged. When Lily walked through the door, her mother started crying. I saw you on the news, she said. My baby on the news. They called you a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a waitress who happened to know a dead language. You're my daughter. That makes you more than you think you are. Lily spent a week doing nothing but sleeping, eating, and trying to remember what normal life felt like. But normal felt wrong now. She couldn't go back to being invisible. Couldn't unknow what she'd learned about how power worked and who it served. Ethan called 2 weeks after they'd returned. I'm dissolving the foundation, he said without preamble. Liquidating all assets. The money will be divided between reparations for the families whose land claims were suppressed and a new organization dedicated to indigenous language preservation. I want you to help run it. I don't have any experience running organizations. Neither did I when I inherited the foundation. But you understand why this matters. You've met the people whose stories were erased. That's worth more than experience. I need to think about it. Take your time. The offer stands as long as you need it to. But Lily already knew her answer. She'd spent her whole adult life trying to be small enough not to get hurt. It hadn't worked. She'd gotten hurt anyway, just slower, quieter, in ways that didn't leave visible scars. Speaking up had been terrifying, but it had also been the first time in years she'd felt fully alive. She called Ethan back the next day. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. My father consults on all linguistic projects. He gets full credit for his original research. And any speakers of endangered languages we work with get meaningful control over how their knowledge is preserved and shared. No more outsiders deciding what matters. Done. Anything else? Pay people what they're worth. The translators, the field researchers, the community members who share their knowledge. No more getting rich off other people's languages. Agreed. Ethan paused. Thank you, Lily. For everything. For being brave enough to whisper that one word in a ballroom. None of this happens without you. None of this happens without your grandfather, Lily corrected. He's the one who chose truth over safety. We just finished what he started. The legal proceedings took 18 months. Grand juries, depositions, testimony. Lily spent hours in courtrooms and law offices explaining verb tenses and grammatical structures to lawyers who'd never considered that language could be a form of evidence. Her father testified about the systematic suppression of his research. Rachel testified about the attack at the bunker. Sarah presented archaeological evidence of the deliberately hidden entrance. And Ethan testified about discovering that his family's entire legacy was built on lies. In the end, 7 people were convicted of various fraud and conspiracy charges. Meridian Heritage was dissolved. 3 major oil companies were forced to renegotiate drilling rights based on the historical treaties James Calloway had documented. And in a small ceremony attended by about 20 people, James Calloway's remains were finally laid to rest beside his son, Ethan's father, with full acknowledgement of how he'd actually died and what he'd died protecting. Lily stood at the burial with Ethan and his daughter Emma, who held her father's hand and asked smart questions about her great-great-grandfather's work. Did he know he was being brave? Emma asked. I think he was just trying to do the right thing, Ethan said. Sometimes that's the same as being brave. Will people remember him now? Yes. They'll remember him for what he actually was, someone who chose truth over comfort. Emma seemed satisfied with that. She placed a flower on the casket, a small gesture from someone who'd never met him but who would carry his legacy forward. After the ceremony, Lily walked with her father through the cemetery. He moved slower than he used to, but steadier. Sobriety looked good on him, even if it had come late. You know what I realized, he said? All those years I spent angry about what was taken from me. About Damien and the university and the career I lost. I was right to be angry, but staying angry was killing me. What changed? You did. You showed me that the work mattered more than my ego, that the languages and the people who spoke them, they were worth protecting even if I never got credit, even if I got destroyed for trying. He stopped walking and looked at her. I wasted 15 years being bitter. Don't make the same mistake. I won't, Lily promised. I'm too busy actually doing the work to waste time being bitter about it. The Language Preservation Foundation officially launched 6 months later. They started small, documenting 3 endangered dialects in the same region where her father had done his original research. But this time they did it right. Paid the speakers fairly. Let them control how their knowledge was recorded and shared. Created educational programs that belonged to the communities, not to outside institutions. Lily learned that making something right didn't erase the wrong that had come before. The languages that had already died, they were still dead. The people who'd been displaced, they were still displaced. Justice was messy and incomplete and never quite enough, but it was better than silence. On the Foundation's first anniversary, they held an event in Boston. Scholars, journalists, community members, people who cared about languages and history and truth. Lily gave a short speech about why the work mattered, about invisible people and forgotten words, and the power of speaking up. When she finished, a young woman approached her. Maybe 19, college student from the look of her. My grandmother spoke one of the dialects you're documenting, the girl said. She died before I could learn it. But your team recorded an interview with her cousin last month. I got to hear words I thought I'd never hear again. I'm glad, Lily said, and meant it. Can I ask you something? How did you know it was worth the risk, going to Syria, nearly getting killed? How did you know? Lily thought about that night in the Grand Lexington ballroom, about whispering one word and having her entire life change, about choosing to be visible even though being invisible had felt safer. I didn't know, she admitted. I was terrified the whole time, but I realized that staying small and quiet was its own kind of death. At least if I was going to be scared, I wanted to be scared while doing something that mattered. The girl nodded slowly. Thank you for being brave enough to be scared. That night, Lily had dinner with Ethan and Emma at a restaurant that didn't serve tiny portions on oversized plates. Emma was 9 now, bright and curious and full of questions about everything. Dad says you used to be a waitress, Emma said between bites of pasta. I was, at a very fancy hotel. Do you miss it? Lily thought about carrying trays and being invisible and going home too tired to feel anything. No, not even a little bit. Good. Because you're much better at this job. What job is that? Making sure people get to tell their own stories instead of having someone else tell it for them. Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds, Lily thought. She looked at Ethan, who was smiling that rare smile that meant he'd found something worth protecting. She's right, you know, Ethan said. This is your job now, not translating, not documenting, making sure people get to speak for themselves. That's a big job. Good thing you're not doing it alone. He was right about that too. Her father was consulting on 3 projects. Rachel had taken a position as security director. Turned out protecting linguists in difficult regions was basically the same skill set as military operations, just with different goals. Sarah was publishing papers that were changing how archaeological preservation worked. Even David had stayed on, managing the digital archives. They were a strange team, broken in different ways, carrying different scars. But they worked. After dinner, Lily walked home through Boston Common. The city was alive with people, couples on dates, students hurrying to classes, business people talking on phones, invisible people, all of them carrying stories that mattered to someone. She thought about the waitress she'd been 18 months ago. Scared, invisible, convinced that speaking up would only bring pain. She'd been right about the pain. The past year and a half had hurt in ways she was still processing. But she'd been wrong about the cost. Being invisible hadn't protected her. It had just made her disappear in slow motion. Being visible, being loud enough to whisper one dangerous word in a crowded ballroom that had nearly killed her. But it had also given her back something she hadn't realized she'd lost. The ability to look at herself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Just got confirmation. The university is issuing a formal apology and clearing my record. 20 years late, but I'll take it. Lily smiled and typed back, "Proud of you, Dad." His response, "Proud of you too. Thanks for not giving up when I did." She pocketed her phone and kept walking through the city that had once felt like a cage but now felt like possibility. Somewhere out there, languages were dying, stories were being erased, people were being made invisible by systems designed to keep them quiet. But somewhere out there were also people who spoke up anyway, who whispered dangerous words, who chose truth over comfort. Lily had learned something in a bunker beneath the Syrian desert, reading words her father had taught her, in a language that powerful people had tried to bury. Silence was safe until it killed you, and speaking up was dangerous until it saved you. The trick was figuring out which risk you could live with. For Lily Bennett, former waitress, current truth teller, forever her father's daughter, there was no contest. She'd take dangerous truth over safe silence every single time. And maybe, just maybe, that was what bravery actually looked like.